Hi, I'm Mark Greer, Executive Director of the Akron Bicentennial, and in partnership with PBS Western Reserve, we're pleased to present the Forgotten History Forum series. The Forgotten History Forums will explore aspects of Akron's history that, while critical to our development, are not often discussed. Throughout this year-long series, we'll highlight seminal points in our history, some undiscovered and others which still challenge us today. Topics will include women trailblazers in Akron's history, the development of the new Akron History Anthology published by the University of Akron Press, Akron's Native American history, the history of deaf rubber workers, the impact of urban renewal, particularly on Akron's Black community, and the history of the African American Church, among others. On behalf of the Akron Bicentennial, we hope you enjoy our Forgotten History Forum series. So now we get to kick off one of our most exciting Forgotten History Forums, and it's my pleasure to bring to you the program director at the Summit FM, Mr. Brad Savage. But actually, before Brad comes, because I forgot to, exactly. Sorry, Brad. I kind of wanted to get him moving first. So before Brad comes, I want to just point out your question cards. How many of you have an index card? Great. So hopefully you grabbed a pencil, write your questions down. During the show, about halfway, our team will be coming down the aisles. You can take your question cards and pass them to the ends of the aisles. That's going to help for our Q&A portion at the end. And Brad, who will actually be moderating the panel, will actually read the questions from the stage. So we'll pick them up about midway through the forum and leading up into the Q&A. So question cards, very important. Pass those to the ends of the aisles. And now we are going to bring forward Program Director at the Summit FM. Please help us welcome Mr. Brad Savage.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, what a great turnout, what a great crowd for tonight's event. And thanks for being here. We'll introduce the panelists in just a moment. And so first off, do we have any Summit FM members, regular listeners? The Summit is local, independent, all-music public radio. Thank you for your support. We do all music. We're affiliated. Our license is held by the Akron Public Schools, but we're a fully independent organization supported by member support and local underwriters and grants. We're heard at 91.3 FM here in Akron, and in recent years, about 10 years ago, we added Youngstown 90.7 FM. We're also heard in Athens, Ohio, home of OU, Ohio University. Any Bobcats in the room? Yep. So we're also heard there at 90.1. So 3 signals across greater Ohio, but a real focus. We started as an Akron station, and a big part of what we do is Akron music. We play a ton of local music, and the whole mission of the radio station comes down to music and community. New artists, indie artists, deeper tracks from older artists and library material, and a ton of local music, including 330 at 3:30 every weekday. So I moved here about coming up on 10 years ago and really immersed myself in the Akron music history. And that's why I think it's such a great honor to moderate and to host this panel. Also, just a quick note, tonight's show is a TV show, or it will be. PBS Western Reserve is filming tonight. So they're going to turn this into a full TV program. Yes. And the whole Forgotten History series they're making into a program as well. We're also going to use the audio as a radio broadcast for the 7 o'clock special on the Summit in the coming weeks. So it's a radio show, it's a TV show, it's a history forum, and we also are very thrilled to partner regularly for over 9 years now with PBS Western Reserve. We do our Studio C sessions. Those are the in-studio live concerts with touring bands, with local bands, and we've been doing that since even before I joined the station in 2015. It's a great partnership, and those are one of the perks of being a member of the station is you get invited to our performance facility at our studios. We're at Ellett High School. We're at Ellett CLC in Akron. That's where the station studios are located. And if you're not a member, take out your phone right away and become a member at thesummit.fm. Let's get the panel up here. Let's start out. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists and have them take a seat here. And first off, our first panelist is a founder of the Bizarros, who have been going since the mid-'70s and still are playing today, still an active band, and he started a major indie record label in the late 70s called Clone Records. Please welcome Nick Nicholas. And also, Nick does a podcast with Bob Ethington, and Bob is traveling. He couldn't be here tonight, but the podcast they do for the Summit FM is called From Akron and Beyond, and it's available on all the podcast sites. It's available on our website, or we broadcast the show on Thursday nights at 10, a deep dive into local music history, not just music either, like arts and culture and other community leaders from Akron and beyond. So join us on Thursdays for that. And a big salute to Bob Ethington, who worked here at the library for years. He retired just a couple years ago and then started up this radio show podcast. So, but yeah, Bob's doing a family thing. He's out of town right now. Up next, I'd like to introduce an archivist, a musician with a ton of bands through the years, but really just a man who makes the scene in the Akron sound. And his history really is, we'll get into this a little later, but the Akron Sound Museum and the Akron History Center, he and the late Wayne Beck really put together a lot of the collection that is now permanently displayed there. And Mr. Image is also a radio DJ. He does a show on Cleveland State at WCSB 89.3 each week for a number of years now. So let's welcome Jimmy Image. Come on up. And then up next, we call her Little Miss Akron. She has a recent memoir about Akron music and kind of growing up around the Akron music community, and a new solo album. And you may know her for many years as the frontwoman of Unit 5, Tracy Thomas. Come on up. And many of our guests actually have some items available in the lobby after our panel tonight. They'll be able to sell and autograph for an additional fee, the records and books and so forth. I'm just kidding about the additional fee. Let's bring up someone that is really synonymous with Akron area music and has a long and storied career, including Tin Huey and the Waitresses, Mr. Chris Butler. Come on up, Chris. And then up next we have a local author, and when we say he wrote the book on the Akron Sound, we're not kidding, and he has copies available in the lobby. Calvin Ridebaum. Calvin, come on up. And then also today, a co-founder of Devo, and he's going to talk about the de-evolution concept and all the early history. He's been on Nick and Bob's From Akron and Beyond show as well. Fascinating stories with Mr. Bob Lewis. Come on up. So it's a heck of a panel. I'm so excited to kind of get started. Now, we had announced that local author David Giffels would join us as well, and sadly, he had to cancel. He got called out of town, special project. He had to go to Nashville to interview the Black Keys. So a fair excuse, I suppose. But I kind of want to start there, though, guys. The recent success of the Black Keys. Would they have even happened if not for the Akron sound in the late 70s into the early to mid 80s, kind of setting the stage, for putting Northeast Ohio on the map, musically speaking? They would have still. Well, but did we kind of, in this area, did your music scene kind of, somewhat make it fertile ground, we'll say, for major bands to break out of this area across different genres and sounds?
They busted their butt for 10 years.
Yep.
Which kind of we all did too, but they really played every possible venue. Jump in a station. Those days, you can't really do that anymore. Jump in a station wagon, because there were two people in the band, right? And they drove everywhere, the opening of an envelope, as the cliche goes.
Yeah, they paid their dues for years.
They earned, there's blood on every one of the records they sold. So, and congratulations, because they're really great.
Absolutely. Well,
I would say that they came from good stock.
Yes, for sure. Nick, go ahead and mention. I kind of want to start at the beginning of when we say the Akron sound era. Now, Akron, Ohio has some history in music going back to, one of the biggest singers of the 40s, Vaughn Monroe, came out of here originally. And then Ruby and the Romantics in the 1950s. Yeah. And yes.
Two of the guys from Alice Cooper's original band.
Right. Which we just heard Alice Cooper's getting his original lineup back together for a new album. Nick, when did the Akron sound era kind of begin? Tell us what where it started for you and the Bizarros, and then what led to Clone Records.
Wait, Chris, wasn't it around? You were still in the Numbers band in '75, would you say? So I'd say a little between '75 and '76, things started forming.
When did you start up Clone Records as a label?
Well, it's weird. I wanted the Bizarros to get signed, so I put a record out on. I couldn't think of anything else. Guerrilla Records, and it was an EP, and I sent it out to different record labels and different. And then got a lot of not a lot, but international success, and a lot of college stations were playing it, so I thought, there might be something more to this than just that. So then I turned it into a label.
Signing other bands, was it mostly Northeast Ohio bands?
Yeah, except on Bowling Balls from Hell, Volume 2, I have a band from Osaka, Japan. I'd get unsolicited.
Bowling Balls Part 2, the compilation. Yeah. I brought show and tell, everyone, so that's great.
I got unsolicited demo tapes from all over the world, actually. And those guys they looked cool and they sounded cool.
Was it, so first off, this wasn't common. Like back in that era, the major labels were running everything as far as music. Like it wasn't as easy to start an independent record label at that time. How did you make that happen? How did you finance that happening?
Well, it's interesting that I don't know if anybody here knows. Well, I think my favorite Ohio band is Perubu.
Yep.
And recently lost David Thomas. He just passed away recently. And him and Peter Lochner, who was also a member of Perubu, who went on to do other things later, worked at a cool record store in Cleveland called Hidio's Discodrome. And I'd visit that,
John Thomas.
Huh?
John Thomas.
Yeah, John Thompson,
Thompson.
Yeah, he just passed away about a year ago. So I'd go there and hang out, and I put my record out. They influenced me. They had a record out a year before I did. And they told me who to send the record to. Where to have it pressed, the different magazines and authors and radio stations. So that's how it started.
So we saw Bowling Balls 2. Now this was the original Bowling Balls from Hell, which was 1980 release, with the waitresses, and the late Ralph Carney is featured here, and
Bob Lewis.
And Bob Lewis is, yeah, Hurricane Bob is on here, right, right. So I guess, did Clone end up being kind of a full-time thing for you along with the band?
No, it was always a part-time deal. I had worked three part-time jobs and that in the evening.
And tell us about the Bizarros today. You guys are still going strong.
Yeah, 3 of the original members. Well, and actually our drummer, who's been with us the least, he's been with us 24 years. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, he's here today. Martin Flanoy's out there.
Oh,
so
there's Martin. Hello, Martin.
He's going in for a rotator cuff surgery. He's going to be out of commission for 6 months. So tomorrow we're auditioning our first drummer in 24 years, you know.
Yeah. Nice. And let's start also with, you mentioned the Numbers Band. Now, the Numbers Band are technically out of Kent, right? And how did they play into this, into the Akron sound? Because they're still going strong today, too. 15, 60, 75, the Numbers Band are, 55 years into their career now. So go ahead, Chris, yeah.
The Numbers... You got me?
There
okay,
you go.
The Numbers Band are a force of nature, and we are so lucky in this area to still have them. They are amazing. Before a few of the Akron clubs actually opened, we all got work in Kent and on the Water Street Strip. And the Numbers Band were really significant because I believe that they created an audience with an expectation for original music. Yes, they were blues-based, but there was they did so much within the genre, and Bob began to write, and I believe that they're really significant for all of us because they kind of set the stage for, or groomed, or whatever term you want to use, for an audience which still goes out to see live music. Thank you very much. There's an expectation of hearing something that you wrote or something original. And all the other bands on the Water Street also picked up on that. Now, on Water Street, you were not in the music business, you were in the beer business. It wasn't like there were 50 bands on the bill. There was one band. You had a residency, and you played 3 one-hour sets a night. And that made you really good musicians, but also you have a lot of time to fill. And so there was a lot of writing. And so maybe there were many genre bands, as a country rock band or whatever, but people began to write. And that was really key, and the audience accepted it, liked it, expected it. And I think that spillover came, that wave, so to speak, also reached Akron when the clubs like the Bank and the Crypt were established. Because I don't think there were any other Akron, this is before my time because I'm a Cleveland brat, so maybe you guys can fill me in. Were there any clubs, rock clubs in Akron before those 2 venues?
They were the ones in Portage Lakes, that people would go to. Yeah. What was that? What was that again? The Draft House.
But that was like cover band stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the expectation for originality was kind of
Kent.
shot through all of us, we were also blessed with a couple fortunate things. One in Akron, or Kent for that matter too, nobody gave a shit about us, so nobody gave a sugar about us, sorry. Beep, bleep, which means we could do whatever we wanted. And also, it was an era where semi-professional tape recorders were manufactured that didn't cost, $50,000, $60,000. You could get an 8-track machine for $1,500, say. And so we now had a way to record, to make our own records. And then there were pressing plants. There's one in Cincinnati, I think, called Queen City, we all went to.
Yeah, we use that in Nashville Record Productions.
Nashville, right, okay. Right, so there are places, that, you know, like, they're usually used to high school choirs, right, with you know, really bad graphics on the cover, and you know, we would start something with cool graphics and all this weird music and get back. It was like, Bob and I were talking earlier, I think it was like maybe a buck a pressing or something with a package. It was like $1 for an LP. Wow. You know, so we had.
Yeah, the 45s without a cover, without a color, was 20 cents for 1,000.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you remember that?
Then we make our own covers. Right. So anyway, we had means, method, and opportunity. That's
you
my
know,
point.
too, we should mention, you were talking about Kent, we had 3, you know, bands in residency, you know, Numbers Band, of course, but 3 bands that became, you know, national and internationally known. You started out with the James Gang, right, with Joe Walsh, the JBs, yes. And then the Raspberries and the Glass Heart. You go Friday nights for like 3 or 4 months, and that's who you saw.
And would have midweek blues shows, so we got to see. It was a stop on the blues circuit because a touring artist could pick up a date in the middle of the week in between going to a major urban center for the weekend. So on a Wednesday or Thursday, because Hound Dog Taylor was there every month from Detroit, Charlie Musselwhite, and a whole bunch of other people, James Cotton. You know, all these people blew through Kent, so there was a really wonderful history of the blues.
And a lot of that happened because of Bob Kidney.
Yes,
Because he had
exactly.
been, he was in the Navy, and he was stationed in Chicago. He wasn't in the Navy very long, about 6 months. But while he was there, he went to all the blues clubs on the South Side, and got to know the musicians. So then when he came back to Kent, he was able to, like, he would call him and say, you know, come play in Kent, we'll take care of you.
Let me ask this then with Chris. When did Tin Huey come about, and is that about the same time as the Bizarros are starting to do their first recordings?
I have amazing. There are available recordings. Tin Huey dates back to 1973, and Harvey, you need to correct me if I'm right, wrong. Harvey Gold.
Harvey
here.
Gold is in the audience.
Yes.
A hand for Harvey.
Yeah, I was playing bass in the Numbers Band, and upstairs, either upstairs or downstairs at JB's, and this weird little band from Akron would blow in, and they were Tin Huey, and they were phenomenal. And they had maybe 15 people, 10 of them being wives and girlfriends or whatever, and they were just spectacular. And a very long story about I began to write songs, and the mindset of the Numbers Band is very factory. This is a working band. It is a blue-collar institution. You make the gig, you show up for rehearsals, unless you're in jail or in the hospital. Well, I tried to make it a third exception to get my picture taken for this fake waitress's band because we were going to be on some stiff record. So I blew off rehearsal, so I was fired. And I swore that I would never be in another band, but Ralph Carney from Tin Huey said, you know, we're looking for another writer, which is bizarre because Tin Huey was the most creative band I've ever been in. Everybody in Tin Huey wrote songs. Why they needed another person, I don't know. In fact, one of our inside jokes is Tin Huey music is defined by always having one too many people playing on something in any given song. But we noodled around for a couple of weeks at Mark Price's basement, and it was a wonderful fit, and so I stuck.
So how did Tin Huey end up on Warner Brothers Records? Because I've got here, I don't have it on LP, but I've got an unopened original 8-track tape of Tin Huey unopened tin Huey 8-track of contents dislodged during shipment. This we'll open the bidding. Here we go. This may be one of the strangest records to ever be released on a major record label. And it's so great. I mean that, and I mean that as a full compliment. So yeah, kind of take us to that point. I guess maybe part of that is the success of Devo at the time. Is that right? Devo started to kind of get some attention by mid to late 70s too.
Yeah, originally Devo was a Kent phenomena, but I like to think of Akron and Kent as being like twin stars, where the stars rotate around and they pulse, because there was always interplay between the two areas. And in fact, there was really no place for Devo to play in Kent. And then Ward Welsh opened the Crypt, and all of a sudden there was an opportunity for unusual music to be heard. And so, and then through contacts that were made with them, the Rubber City Rebels, the Dead Boys, and then from then expanded out.
Yep.
And then after we used Queen City to do our first single, I think we wound up selling 19,000 of those, just out of the car and stuff like that. But that got the interest of a bunch of record companies, and the record companies were in this weird place because they didn't know what to do with punk or new wave. They hadn't predicted it. It wasn't a manufactured sound like the Monkees or something like that. And so they didn't really know how to judge them, so they wanted to sign up bands that would be kind of in the genre. I remember Chris Blackwell from Island Records flew into Akron in one of those horrible blizzards, like '77 or something like that, because he had heard a demo tape, and it triggered something in him. I always thought that actually Devo would have been better off signing with Island, because after Devo turned him down, he went out and he found another little obscure band called U2. And he had told us that he would make us Island's #1 project worldwide, but decided to go with Warner's.
Well, and let's back up from there. Give us a little history of the foundation of Devo and the whole concept of the band, and as kind of an art project, really.
Well, it was an art project and a political response to the war in Vietnam, the shootings at Kent State, and the fact that we could see the hypocrisy between what they said was going on and what was actually going on, and in light, so we predicted that it would not end well. And if you look around at the situation today, it was worse than we could have imagined.
Right. Well, and how fortuitous that Devo is on a high-profile tour right now, right here in 2025 as well. So then, let me bring up women in the Akron music scene. Let's talk about Unit 5 and Tracy Thomas. So this is the Scared of the Dark album, 1981, Clone Records. And Tracy, so tell us a little bit leading up to how Unit 5 came to be.
Well, it was me and Bob Ethington, who is not here tonight.
Right, yep.
Worked at Record Theater in Fairlawn. It was my first job. And I heard he was a drummer, and I wanted to start a band, but I was into Linda Ronstadt, Carly Simon, and he refused because Bob. And then we decided just to give it a go. And we got together and we just jammed with a bunch of people, for lack of a better word. And then that was it. We were off and running.
Was there a lot of participation from women in the Akron sound music scene? Were women going to the shows anyway?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially like Hammer Damage, because those boys were so cute.
Right.
All the-
Right.
All
That
the girls
helps.
be at the Hammer Damage business, but there were more than you think. I think they just weren't as recognized, and I'm not trying to like say that to be sugary, but yeah, there was Sue and Deb from Chai Pig, and
Yep.
Oh,
there was a
that's right.
band called the Bettys, all women. You remember the Bettys? And then Myrna from Human Switchboard. I mean, we were out there, but we weren't necessarily getting the attention for whatever reason.
Sure.
And then Unit 5 did. I mean, I'm grateful we did start to get some attention.
Well, and now's a perfect time to mention your new project and the book, the the Tell All memoir. Tell us a little bit about Little Miss Akron.
I don't know what the I was thinking. I just did it. It was the pandemic. I was bored, and I got really into genealogy, and I'm like, well, I'm going to start keeping a record of things for my kids. And it turned into me just writing and writing and writing, and then my friend read it, and she's like, oh, no, this is a book. I'm like, a book? And so I did it. I sat there during the pandemic. It ended up taking 4 years, and I wrote everything. So, well, not everything. I would have been blackballed from the city of Akron if I had written everything. But there's a lot of stuff in there. It's just, my life and music and other things.
And you have a terrific new album, Words Can't Save Us
Thank
Now,
you.
just released a couple months back. Yes.
Produced by Ryan Humbert.
Produced by Ryan Humbert, who is in the crowd here tonight. And he's with the band The Shootouts these days. So Akron, to this day, yeah, how about that? I mean, to this day, so much music. And if you look at Akron and then add in, Canton and Kent and Youngstown and surrounding, and of course, Cleveland, which is its own other world, this is some pretty influential and powerful music. I want to ask Jimmy Image here. Jimmy and I were talking just the other night. We were out seeing Big Pop and Time Cat and Fancy Legs, and actually Chris Butler joined Fancy Legs on stage. So did Harvey Gold, as a matter of fact. So, a thread to today's current music. But Jimmy and I said at the Rialto Theater the other night, he said, of the whole panel, he's the biggest of the fan, the listener. You were there at all the shows. So tell us a little bit of your history in this area, too.
Well, yes, I'm not really a musician. When I grow up, I want to be an artist, but I am a fan. I'm a fan of the bands. I'm a fan of the sound. I'm a fan of the fans. I love it when everybody shows up because that helps all of us, keep on doing what we do. And if I could start at the beginning, in the beginning of what I do, somewhere around 1996, I had a pretty good box of live recordings I had made. And, cassette tapes only last so long, I hear, even though I still play them today. And I said, well, I really need to do something with these before they just fall apart. And my love of music and the bands that were on those tapes, I wanted to preserve, present, promote, and share that sound with the friends I knew that were there at the time, or other people go, oh, I heard about them. I'd like to hear them, but they're not around. And I would share, and I started making these little CDR compilations from there and just passed them around and said, check it out, see what was happening. So my whole thing was to preserve and present and share the sound as I knew it. And then, with a lot of help from my friends, I got boxes and boxes of cassette tapes, fanzines, flyers. I have some flyers and pictures out in the corridor there that were given to me by many of my friends. And nothing belongs to me. It all belongs to the people. It's like a library. So I could never sell any of what I have.
Yep.
It is, I hope someone will take it when I'm gone and share it continuously through history.
A real archivist, and just someone that's been present through much of this. Now, Jimmy, I understand some of your collection along with Wayne Beck, led to what became the Akron Sound Museum, which has moved around a couple of times. It was at the bomb shelter for a while, but just recently, it's become an exhibit at the new Akron History Center. And Calvin can speak to this a little bit too.
Yes, thank you, Calvin.
Because Calvin has been quite involved, and you've been the executive director for a while of the museum, right?
Well, not so much anymore since we moved it over to Dave's venue, but for many years it was you know, Jimmy and Wayne started the first shows out there of the memorabilia, and I mean I'm an archivist, a writer, and I had been living in Cleveland for a number of years, and I had done a couple books up there for Burton, Ohio. Twinsburg had hired me, and basically, I moved back to Akron for various reasons, contacted my publisher, and they said, you're living in Summit County now? We'd really like to get some books on Akron, because my publisher did local histories.
Sure.
So I wrote the modern history book for modern Akron, which was Akron from 1950 on. And when they were out selling it to stores, my company called me up and said, you know, it's this music thing that's selling this book. I'm like, yeah, I was there when I was like 19. It was cool. I was in the crowd. It was a lot of fun. And I actually reached out to Wayne Beck, and he asked me to get involved. And I wrote that book, and I started working with the museum with Wayne. And then when Wayne started to fall ill, I wound up taking it over because by that point, you know, Nick and Chris and Tracy and Jimmy and Harvey and all these people had become friends, and I felt obligated to keep it going. Because quite honestly, when Wayne first called me about it, I was looking at maybe being a paying gig, and I wound up putting money into it.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it was just, I was there as like a 19-year-old kid at the bank. So, and you know, for any of us that were there, we felt so cool that we were in the in crowd watching these bands, watching you guys. So, yeah, Wayne and I ran with the museum, and we started getting more and more stuff. You know, Chris donated a ton of stuff. Nick did too. Jimmy did too. Jimmy was on our board of directors. So, yeah, it was a labor of love, and I'm glad that I was able to move it over to the Akron
History Center.
Yeah, the
yeah,
Akron History
that
Center.
just opened like just this spring. So, yeah.
You know what? One thing though, Brad, I don't know why I was thinking of this, but because you mentioned it earlier, you are one of the most positive, upbeat people I know.
Amen.
But
and it's mostly real.
the most excited I think I ever saw you is when we were working on a radio show together.
Yep.
And I mentioned to you that Von Monroe's from Akron, and you didn't know that. You blew up.
That's pretty cool. Yes, I happen to have a deep love of the pre-rock and roll era and the crooners and the swing era and so forth, 30s, 40s. One of my radio shows is all about that era. So, yeah, and just kept realizing and finding more. You go down the rabbit hole for Ohio-based artists, and in all genres. You know, I mean, back into the 30s and 40s, and then people like Bobby Womack is from Cleveland. You know, there's so much Ohio history, or the Gods out of Columbus, who I've become a big fan of through the years as well. So, Calvin, talk about the Akron Sound. This is the book on the History Press. Available locally, available here tonight even, in fact. Yes, I mean, it's pretty neat that a major history book has come out. Tell us about the process of documenting all this great history.
When the book on modern Akron came out, the publisher said that it was the music scene that was really driving it. And I got asked, do you know anything about it? I'm like, well, just I was a kid in the audience watching them. I know that, you know. And Then I did a lot of hard work by calling up people like Chris and Tracy going, hey, can I interview you for this book? And then I wrote down what they said.
Perfect, perfect. Oh.
And yeah, it's doing archiving work, because all joking aside, I've done a couple projects about city histories, things like that. It's very interesting when you're doing that, because you get things like Nick talking about them being together for years. So when you talk to the Bizarros, you get the same story from 4 or 5 people, because they're still friends, they still know each other. When I talked to Chris and Harvey, I got some of the same stories. Some of these bands, where the people hadn't spoken in years, I get 4 different stories about what happened, like completely different. And it was an easy project because there wasn't that usual sifting through the different stories like there are in other projects, because so many of these people had relationships and friendships that were still solid after 40 years, where it was pretty much just the Rubber City Rebels that didn't have that. But everybody else, it was such an easy project because I didn't have to sift through the different stories.
So let's take another important piece of the story, the Stiff Records Akron compilation. So this is kind of remarkable. Stiff Records is a very respected British label, like a coolest of the cool, and where Elvis Costello and Lena Lovitch and Devo had early singles. How in the world did this British record label end up coming to Akron and putting together this full collection of, it's like a local music compilation of all Akron bands? Chris seems to have some history here.
So I think it was 1977, all right? Knocking around Mark Price's house. Mark Price was the bass player in Tin Huey, and he had one of the 8-track machines that I mentioned. It was an Atari 8-track with, I think, DBX noise reduction. And my other friend, I was working with Liam Sternberg, Rick Daly, he had a TIAC Tascam, which I believe is Dolby noise reduction. They're incompatible. It didn't matter. What do we know? We just went from studio to studio and recorded with our 8-track tapes. As I understand it, excuse me, Dave Robinson and Paul Conroy were the principals for Stiff Records. Stiff really quickly started as mail order above the Hope and Anchor in Islington. Very big on pub rock. They signed a lot of people that nobody else would touch, like Elvis Costello, Nick Lowe, on and on and on. And they became very eccentric. They were famous for their promotion. They were famous for their graphics, a lot of jokes. They also were famous for not paying people, but that's another story. Anyway, Dave Robinson and Paul Conroy come in like December or something, November maybe, and they were going to woo Devo. They wanted to woo Devo, right?
Jerry Casale and I had written the song Be Stiff.
Okay.
And when they heard that, they thought, well, this is perfect for them.
Yeah.
And so they signed a limited deal with us for 2 singles. But we let them know that we were not the only people in Akron, Ohio who were trying to do things. And
Right, and the key thing here is good old Ohio weather, because they got snowbound and their planes were not flying out of Hopkins. So they said, "Well, gee, what else we got around here?" What he got was Liam Sternberg orchestrated a listening party at Mark Price's house, where everybody who had been doing their individual recordings played song after song after song to Dave Robinson. And Dave Robinson would listen to, a few 10 seconds, B-side, 10 second, B-side, 10 second, B-side. But in the end, it must have made an impression, because they decided that we were the new Liverpool.
Yeah, you need to mention
And
the
that
Mark
they were going to do
Mothersbaugh
this.
story.
That they were going to do a compilation album. And when we said, well, let's see a contract, he said, write your own. We're not going to ever honor it anyway, which is what we did. And I have a side story of actually going to Stiff's offices in London years later and demanding my 150-pound royalty, which surprisingly I did get because the week earlier, Madness on their label, the ska band, had been in there, wanted their money, and they blew the place up. So they were afraid that this crazy Yank, was gonna, start another fight. So I got my 150 quid. Anyway, they put out this compilation. A lot of the bands were made-up bands because we didn't have enough bands. And so we each played on everybody's records, and it gave the appearance of that. They put a scratch and sniff tire on it that smelled like burnt rubber.
That was great.
Again, stiff promotion. They went to Nebworth, and they made these crazy hats with that tire logo. They Akron compilation crazy hats. They made a ton of these, and they lost their shirt. In fact, on a BBC special on Stiff Records, it was out several years ago, Dave Robinson said, yeah, I still got a garage full of these. But it was wonderful. I mean, golly, Stiff Records.
Chris, remember that there was Stiff had a contest. Whoever answered the right questions or whatever got an all-expense-paid trip to Akron. Remember that?
Yes, all expense. And somebody won.
Somebody
and
did
Richard,
win.
he became like a buddy of ours. Everybody,
Right.
How many people here in the panel remember Richard Bear?
Yeah.
He came to my house and hung out
this,
with my mom.
this guy came. This guy came.
Yeah, so I mean,
He had a wonderful time.
Part of the contest was he got to come to my house. So he came and sat in my living room, and he and my
did
mom
it.
talked about poker.
That's
he
amazing.
did, he came back, I bet you for 7 or 8 years, he made so many friends here that he would just keep coming back. Remember, he even I took him to a City of Akron car auction where they had cars they didn't want anymore, and he bid on one, and he got it, and he drove on the wrong side of the street and wrecked it like right away. Yeah. Or our side of the street, anyway.
You talk about promotions they had. You chase down legends when you're writing this kind of book, and one of them was, there was Akron nights and bars in London. And honestly, I didn't believe that. I thought that was folklore. And I went through some, I got some old London newspapers, ads, and there literally were Akron nights in London clubs. And I can't prove this, but looking into it, when this happened, that was out. The Devo singles were out, and Rachel Sweet had an album with them. So they were promoting 3 or 4 Akron releases. Oh yeah, and they were promoting 3 or 4 albums. So I think all those like Akron nights and London bars were basically Stiff, like promoting it.
That record. But that's still pretty cool. What is the story that's come up on From Akron and Beyond podcast a couple times about like a group from Akron, like several friends went to New York and got waved in for free? That's in your book, right?
That was when Wayne went there to see the American debut of Flock of Seagulls with some people from Akron. And when they went up there and started showing their IDs, the people at the door said, "You guys are from Akron? You can come in for free. Akron's cool."
And we still are today, absolutely.
I've done some events in Washington, D.C., because unfortunately he passed away last year, but a close friend of mine was the punk archivist for the D.C. Public Library for their collection. He actually graduated from Revere. So I did some events in D.C. with them, and I was at the Society of American Archivists Convention in D.C. one year, and I was doing something in Donald Byrd's old club. And I had some archivists from Germany come up, all excited about, like, I was selling a book about the Akron sound, because these Germans knew the Akron bands and wanted to buy the books.
Wow. Wow. So let me ask this. This is a question that comes up about the Akron sound sometimes. cohesively, or when you look at that movement, is it punk? Is it punk rock?
My favorite line, and this is from Buzz Click, said that, none of us sounded alike. But what was going on is there was no seat for young people like us at the record label table. And then this new wave punk thing happened, and we just pushed through that door. We didn't sound alike, but we were all talented people that kicked that door down because it was open when there was nothing at the table otherwise.
It was a real diverse scene. I mean, nobody, the Rubber City Rebels came close to maybe what people thought punk was, but they really weren't. And nobody else, fit the category.
I have a quick definition of Akron sound, because, all right, Akron sound. No, two things going for us. One, real estate. We had a place to practice. We had basements. That's so key. You can't do what we did in New York City or any other large urban area because there's no place to play or practice or work on stuff. And the second thing is we had a limited pool of players. I use this example a lot. I lived in New York for a long, long time. And if you wanted to put together a rockabilly band, you would put an ad in the Village Voice that would say, okay, rockabilly band forming, must have the right look, the right instrument, know all the material, here audition day. And you'd get 100, 200, 300, 500 people. In Akron, there was one rockabilly guy, all right? And my point is that if you wanted to start a band with a person, you usually had someone who was a majority of one had really loved a certain genre or a certain thing. So you had these diverse, you're starting with diverse people, and you take a little from each and you make a new thing, because if you wanted to play with someone else, which is a thrill usually, it wasn't compromised. It was like, what can you bring to the party? Or you bring this, or you bring that. And so it was a very savory soup. It wasn't just one thing. It was an amalgam of a lot of different talented people with divergent and disparate interests. And out of that, I believe that you got a singular band uniqueness with each one of these organizations.
A lot of it was just blind luck. I mean, so the Crypt. The Crypt was in a rubber workers bar that, Rod and Buzz, or Ward and Buzz, used to play in on a regular basis. And then the strike happened, and the guy that owned the bar wasn't making any money. And supposedly his wife was saying, you need to be home more. So he asked Ward and Buzz, hey, you guys are the only people here that are making money. You guys want to take this bar over and just, do what you want with it and pay me so much money? And they said, sure. And then Ward lived in the same apartment building with Mark Mothersbaugh, and it just, all of a sudden they had their own bar because a guy wasn't making money because of the rubber strike. Exactly. I mean, wow. Pure luck.
Yeah. So how...
That was probably the last rubber strike in Akron, as a matter of fact, because after that, there was no longer building tires in Akron.
Right. So a lot of changes in the city, and and just what's going on and what the city is all about around that same time too. Let's talk about Cleveland as well. We mentioned Per Ubu and the late David Thomas, who passed away recently, and there was quite a scene going on in Cleveland as well. Did they interact? Were the Akron bands going up and playing Cleveland? Were the Cleveland bands coming to Akron?
Yeah, we had a pretty steady Thursday night gig opening for Per Ubu. I bet you, probably about a dozen times over a year, and I brought them down to open for Devo at the Crypt.
Okay, yep.
But there wasn't a whole lot of that going on.
Yeah, it seemed like, were Cleveland and Akron further apart back then? Like, was it just...
We played with Cleveland bands a lot. We used to play with a band called the Wild Giraffes. Do you remember them?
I played with them
We played with
once.
them quite a bit.
Okay.
I felt like we kind of did a lot with Cleveland. But then I was a little after
That was after.
that. I was like what they call the second wave.
Yeah,
Sure.
And we were more engaged with Cleveland at that point, I think.
I remember, Dave Thomas would come and goof around in Mark Price's studio with Ralph Carney. In fact, he took one backing track. Dave Thomas did his own thing on top of it, Closet Bears, I think.
That's on
Yeah,
Bowling
right.
Balls
Yeah,
1.
yeah. So there was cross fertilization, and I know Ted Huey before me, maybe with me, I don't remember. I see old poster listings or scene listings with Ted Huey playing at Pirates Cove. with
Pirates Cove
Peru.
or the Fantasy on the west side was
Right.
another.
Right. So yeah, now there's like a Berlin Wall between Cleveland, Akron, but at the time, yeah, there was a lot of, because the wonderful thing about all of this, it was only about 100 people doing all this, and so we were pretty close. It was a little competitive, but friendly competitive. It kind of got ruined when somebody got a record deal, but at
Or
first,
when we played softball on Sundays, that
yeah.
everybody ended up fighting.
Yeah, everybody was kind of like helping. It had good fight, and but we were able to pull shows together. A bit of a long story. I'm sorry, but you had asked about Ted Huey earlier and how he got signed to Warner's. I wrote a letter. You would get the Village Voice in Kent a week later, and there was an article by Robert Christgau on him going to England and declaring England is, this is 77 again, and maybe Harvey helped, 76. This great scene of the Clash and the punks and it's fantastic. And I wrote a letter and I said, well, you ought to come to, Akron, Kent, mister, and we got a great scene going on here. And I got a letter, and he said, yeah, okay, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks. And it was like, okay.
I sent him the album. I sent him the album.
Yeah.
Bizarros, Rubber City Rebels, and that's
Yeah,
when
yeah,
he responded to
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. So, we were all triangulating on this guy. So I'm coming, so, I go to Joe Bujak, okay, I'm gonna cuss, and if you cut this, it's okay, but it's for these people. So
Cussing.
okay, you can. Okay, so I go to Joe Bujak, JB, say, Joe, we got this guy coming in 2 weeks. Can you give us a date? Chris, you're going to be big time rock star now. Big time, not like that Joe Walsh. He never come back. He never come back to play my club. He never play. You going to come back and play my club? Yes, Joe, I will. So we cobbled together a PA system, and we got either Bizarros or Chai Pig. I forget who the first time was. Oh, okay, Bizarros for sure. And we cobbled together. We plastered everything with flyers and all this because we were trying to make a scene, because it was kind of a scene, but not a scene. Okay, so we did it. We had a great show. Whew. All right, that's good. All right. So then Robert Christgau says, I want to come. I told my friend Karen Berg. Karen Berg was A&R woman for Epic at the time, and then had moved to Warner's. And I had sent Karen Berg a copy a few years ago, a copy of the Numbers Band album, because I was in charge of doing something with the album, because I thought, television, who I loved, there's similarities in approach to what television was doing and what Numbers Band were doing, so I sent her that. So she said, okay, she's coming in 2 weeks. Go to Joe Bujak. Joe, I'm sorry. Can you give us a date? We got it on the... Oh, Chris, now you're going to be really big rock star, right? Not like that Joe Walsh. He never going to... You going to come back and play my club? Yes, Joe, I will. Okay, so we did it. We cobbled together a big PA system. Chai Pig or Bizarros, boom, 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 we have a show. And then, obviously, you know what happens next. In 2 weeks, Karen Berg says, Jerry Wexler, big buckety buck A&R, here, invented the term rhythm and blues, is coming. And yes, the same, not like that leap Joe Walsh, But he gave us a date, and we did a show, and that's how Ted Huey got asked to be in Warner's. And we tried like to get Jerry to go down and see the Numbers Band, because that's who we loved. And we thought, Jerry Wexler, Atlantic Records, Rhythm and Blues, you are going to love this. He didn't want to hear about it.
Bob still talks about that.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, he does.
What a great panel. In a minute, we're going to move into a little bit of the audience Q&A. Some great questions have been coming in. I have one more show and tell. This is when the Bizarros got signed to Mercury. The Bizarros also went national, and so this album came out in, what, 79? 79. So just briefly tell us how that happened. And here you are running Clone Records, but you're getting upstream to one of the major labels at that point.
It was luck and a little bit of work, I guess. But a guy by the name of Cliff Bernstein, who went on to he's managed Metallica now for
many years, like
probably
20-some years, more
almost
than that.
30 years, and he signed Rush, and he was an A&R guy for Mercury. And for some reason, he took an interest in Midwest bands, and he formed a label called Blank Records that was designed to be run the way jazz labels were, where you didn't have to sell millions. You could break even on 100,000 or make money on 100,000. He signed Perubu, the Suicide Commandos from Minnesota, and us. And there was a shakeup at Mercury Records, and the label was dissolved. I mean, at Mercury, and Blank was dissolved. So we were released on Mercury proper a year later.
It's, again, just kind of like funny luck stories, and you just never quite know how it's going to work out. But in our case, all this music has so much history attached to it. So we'll move now. Thanks again to our great panel. Let's have a hand. Let's have a hand for the Akron Sound panel.
I do have one or two things to add.
Oh, yeah, go right ahead, Jimmy. That's great.
Grandpa Jones. That's where I'm from. I mean, that's the Akron.
Yes,
that's the
Akron
sound
too.
to me.
Yep.
But he wasn't born here, maybe, but he performed a lot of times all around here.
Yep.
And then the other thing is one of the reasons my genre is slightly after Tracy's genre, which is slightly after Chris and everyone's genre. And my friends always said the reason they were in a band was because winters were so bad. All they had to do was stay at home, play music, listen to music, have a friend stop by and jam with them, so they'd start a band. And the same thing with all the bands having members that were in all the other bands. That was very common with people I knew
Tim Longfellow.
in the 80s, Well, I didn't say sleep in bed with them. But anyway.
PBS, baby,
And
PBS.
then for me, I wasn't in a band till Klaus Nomi came to Akron with Unit 5 and the Nelsons and Chai Pig opening, and I got to go work. I thought I was going to do theater because I was into makeup, stage design and stuff like that at the time. Wasn't into music. Well, I hadn't played music. And then after doing everything in New York with Klaus, I realized when I got home, the first time someone said, "Oh, you want to be in a band?" I said, "Oh, yeah." And that's how it happened for me.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a cool thought from just what it was like back then when the bank was open. One of the nicest memories I have is we went to see the Clash play at Civic Theater. And after the Clash show, we all walked down the street to the bank and watched the Unit 5.
Yeah.
I missed the Clash.
How about that? And Nick,
I was working.
who opened for the Clash? This came up on the radio show.
The hip hop, I can't think of his name
It-
now.
It was Grandmaster Flash. Grandmaster Flash.
No,
No?
No, it was
Curtis Blow.
Blow.
It was Curtis
Curtis
Blow.
Blow.
Early hip hop, which I think is super cool that they took them out on the road too, to take Curtis Blow. Well, all right, we've got a couple questions that have come in on the note cards here, and let's start with Bob Lewis first. Question: when did Devo adopt the Devo look? Was it pre-MTV?
Oh, yes, it was definitely the first performance at the Creative Art Festival in Kent in April of '73. We were already in costume.
And you had a lot to do with that concept, right? The costume concept and the look?
Yeah.
Very good, very good. And then another question, yeah, how about that? I mean, think of the impact on musical culture and just worldwide pop culture. The other question for Bob that came in is, have you mended fences with Devo? Did you go to their show on Mother's Day?
I did not go to the show, but the next day, Jerry Casale and I went out to Kent because there are some gentlemen that are here tonight who are shooting a documentary about Northeast Ohio music. And so we went around the campus, we looked at the site of the shootings, and then we went out to eat at Ken Stewart's.
Oh, very nice.
That night, so yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Now we've got one for Chris Butler. Someone wants to hear some of the details of Christmas wrapping by the waitresses. Just share with us that
Christmas
story.
wrapping. Okay, we were in limbo. Our record was finished in February of '81, but our label had lost their distribution, so the record was on the shelf. We were out flogging. All we had was the single, "I Know What Boys Like," with a flip side, "No Guilt." And if there was a college radio station or independent radio station or a major market, but few, because of what Bob said earlier, they didn't know, record companies and radio stations didn't know what to do with this new wave punk stuff. We kept playing all the way through '81, trying to stay alive until our record come out. So they fixed their distribution, and then around in August, our record label had Michael Zilka came up with the idea, or that he would like all the artists on his roster to do a Christmas album. Full spectrum Christmas album. And we all thought it was absolutely ridiculous because he had people like Lydia Lunch, all right, and Alan Vega from Suicide. These are not warm and fuzzy people, okay? And us, we were just, whatever, punk, new wave band, whatever. And we, I needed this like a hole in the head. He said, well, we booked you into the Electric Lady Studios, which is really cool, Jimi Hendrix's studio on 8th Street. And it was early September, and I had 2 weeks to write something, and literally cobbling it together, and I'm the worst person at the time to do any kind of Christmas thing. I was such a Scrooge because my family upbringing was just awful around Christmas. I mean, some people, all they get is underwear for Christmas. We got nothing. I mean, it's Christmas every day, so you're not getting anything. No, it was just awful. Fights, and I was a freelance writer, everybody in New York, people pull the plug on everything December 1st. Which means, but if an editor has an assignment, well, let's call Butler. He'll work through the holidays. So it was like everybody else was goofing off, and I kept working, trying to hit deadlines. So I was such a sourpuss about this, and so I tried to write against type, which is always fun to do if you're a songwriter. Try to do something uplifting when you're such a sourpuss. It's really fun. Of course, it has that fake BS Hollywood ending at the end of the song, which, if you believe, I have a bridge to sell you, and although it just got hit by a Mexican boat, so maybe maybe we'll mark something off. Anyway,
An incident.
right.
They're investigating.
But we're pros, okay? Our band was such good players, and we went in, we did our thing. We had 3 days, and turned it in. Literally, it's a cliche, I know, but I was cobbling together lyrics in a taxi cab from my little house, little apartment over. Take the long way. Electric Lady landed because he had a guitar and an amp, you know. And I was literally writing it, and we recorded it, we turned it in, and we promptly forgot about it. And you know, we did our bit for the label, hooray. And then we go back on the road, and they finally set a release date, February of '82, I believe. And but we're still flogging, we're still on the road. November, Rochester, New York. I call home to my girlfriend, and she says, "Wow, you're all over the radio." And I go, "Finally, we pushed this I know what boys like thing, you know, through whatever slot we could." "No, it's your Christmas song." What? And so we hadn't played it or thought about it. We learned it at sound check, and then we played it that night, and it stayed in our repertoire all the way through. And you know, it had a really good run for a couple of years. It came out in 2 different editions, and then it kind of went away for a while, and then it came roaring back maybe 10 years later or so, and much to my incredible surprise and gratitude, it's kind of become a staple, and it seems to do no harm. I mean, and it kicks me in the butt because I'm in my typical grouchy Christmas mood, and it comes through on the mall speaker or on the radio, and it kicks my butt. It says, "Lighten up," because boy, does it sound good on a car radio. It just comes roaring out, and it's really wonderful. And
I cover it with my band, The Crones.
Yes.
Yeah, how about that?
Well, and let me say, not only the Crones, but I find it so fascinating that in the late 90s, a pretty big name international pop group did a cover of Christmas rapping. The Spice Girls. The Spice Girls covered that song as well.
We do it better.
And
the Crones do it even better.
It was their last releases, so Virgin was the record label, and I went to London to thank the A&R person who did this, because it was quite a coup, and because I own my publishing, and you know, it was one of the few things I did right was hold on to my rights.
Yep.
And I thanked her, and I gave her a bottle of champagne and flowers. She said, "Oh yeah, we wanted to do it last year, but it didn't happen." And they included it, and because it was their last release, they had like an album, then they had like a CD single, and then they had like an EP, and it was in every one of those releases, and it's not a very good version. But because it's there, I get paid.
That's awesome. And going back to 91.3, the Summit, it gives me an excuse to play the Spice Girls each holiday season. So, I mean, we play the Waitresses too, of course, but hey, his name's on the writer's credits, so there. Here's a great comment. Someone said, "Not being an Akron native, been here just 4 years, but being a huge music fan and history fan, I am discovering the great music from Akron." So this audience member wants to know, how can I hear the music that isn't on the streaming services like Shy Pig or Unit 5? And I would say, this is where a great record collection comes in. You got to own the physical media, because not everything is out there. And we do play all those bands on the Summit FM as well. But any tips for like bargain hunting in the thrift store, used record bins, things like that?
Some British labels that have been releasing some of the Akron stuff the last
Yep.
few years, like Soul Jazz Records.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
They did, there's
Time
a...
Traveler has it.
Yep, Time Traveler Records, Scott Shepard. There's a great compilation called Burn, Rubber City Burn on that Soul Jazz label with a big bright green cover. There was a Cleveland compilation too. That's the second one, yeah, so that stuff is out there. Hey, here's another question for anyone on the panel. Any thoughts regarding a music scene developing around that same time, 70s and 80s, in Athens, Georgia? B-52s, REM, the DBs, Dreams So Real, bands like this. Did any of those bands come through our area, or did you guys know any of them? No. Not really.
Well, I just want to say, I believe every community has its sound, and I wish those people who had the ability would archive and present that music, because what I've done has people in other countries and definitely other states have learned from. I have a YouTube that I put up of videos, mostly live videos I shot, some things I got from people. One thing I haven't done a lot of is taking albums and just putting them up there, but every community has its sound, and I support all of them. Like, this is the Akron sound, but what I do, the Ohio Hysterical Music Society, is all of Ohio. And with Akron, for at least 1825 to now.
Right.
And there were canal boat songs that I have heard of that I love, but all communities that are, the people have music.
Well, here's a question or a comment, really, for Jimmy. Someone writes, Jimmy, thank you so much for your archival work. I watch on YouTube all the time. What support do you need to continue? Money, volunteers, equipment? And then they said, when I grow up, I want to be Jimmy Image.
Well, then you'll be an artist when you grow up, because when I grow up, I want to be an artist. But the help I need is the help that the bands, the fans, the radio stations, and all of that, let's just keep doing it. And I'll have a reason to do more, or I'll have more material to work with. And when I'm gone, hopefully I'll inspire someone to keep doing it. So, I mean, help, you can donate anything, but just keep doing it.
Yeah, very, very well said. We have one for Tracy. Someone wants to know, where did Tracy grow up, and where did Unit 5 play, like, most often? What were your top venues?
The Bank.
Mm-hmm.
And then JB's down every Thursday for so long, or was it Friday? I don't know. Numbers Band up, Unit 5 down for years. But those were the two big ones.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Akron. We moved 32 times before I was 12, and my mother made sure I stayed in the Akron Public Schools school district. So my little DNA is everywhere around the city.
And then an additional part, this is kind of a good couple of questions to wrap up. Where is the Akron sound being performed now? Maybe, or maybe to say, what is the equivalent on today's, 330 and Akron music scene? Just shout out some of you. Oh, and Bob can jump in, yeah.
Well, last fall, my wife and I moved back from Euclid. We were right across the street from Lake Erie, and we decided to move back to Akron, and we just kind of stumbled upon the porch rocker phenomenon.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, I could not believe it. It was like, I don't know, is there any other place that has that? I mean,
not to that level.
I mean, it seems like 10% of the population of Akron is involved in the porch rocker. It's amazing.
It's well over, it's like 125 bands or something throughout the day on multiple stages. That just gives you an idea of how thriving the independent music community is today. And I really believe that this movement of the late 70s and early 80s helped to set the stage for all of that and the vibrant music scene that we have today. And how about one last question? How has the Akron music changed from your perspectives? You know, what are some of the biggest differences or most notable things that are different today?
While this was going on, and you know, the joke years later is like every night there was 150 people seeing those bands, but it was the same 150 of us. But what's really odd is while that was going on, there was a pretty big African American music scene that like Howard Hewitt and James Ingram came out of.
Yep.
The legendary shows they had in the Civic were off the charts. And that's not even getting into right down the road at the Cathedral tomorrow, one of the biggest gospel recording empires in the world was going on. Did any of you guys make friends with Rex Humbard Jr. so they could get in that studio?
I knew him.
Because that was the best studio in town, so you made friends with Rex to get in the studio.
And you could hear Akron sound stuff. There is still a huge, it was brought up earlier at the Rialto. They're having their 10th year anniversary show. There were 4 or 5 bands, right? And it was a lot of same idea, cross-fertilization, everybody playing in different bands. And every one of these people would like, holy mackerel, they're great players. It's still going on, great writers. It's great performers. It's still going on. I have to plug Funeral Proposals, which is an amazing young band. They're in their early 20s.
They're the best.
But it's going on right now. The difference is as the pop music era has completely changed. And what you really need to do is establish yourself as a regional act and get out to Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and set up. I still believe you can do really well and do original music, do really well without, you have to do everything. It's still DIY. Well, it's always been DIY, but it's even more so DIY because, major labels are not interested in rock music. Rock music is a pain in the live instruments, recording, it's expensive, as opposed to working in the box computer and doing beats and all of that, which is very sophisticated and very interesting, but it's a completely different tool set, mindset, and that's what the audience is. So the music is still here, and thankfully you all are still going out and seeing shows, because that is it. That's as you said, that your applause is the real Akron sound.
The bands are important, but the bands wouldn't be here without the fans.
I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but like a few weeks ago, the #1 album in the country was a rock album for the first time in years. And then one showed up the other day, a second rock album hit #1. And it had been years since a rock album was a #1 in the country. And two have hit #1
two
lately.
with you, and I know one of them was Ghost, right? The heavy metal band. They wear masks. They're very Alice Cooper influenced, as a matter of fact, and like Blue Oyster Cult and things like that. They're great. Don't give up on rock is the point. Yeah. So, most excellent. This has been a real blast. Our panelists will be available in the lobby to meet and do photos and everything. Let's hear it again for Nick Nicholas and Jimmy Image, Ms. Tracy Thomas, and Chris Butler, Calvin Ridebaum down here, and Bob Lewis. Thanks as well to Bob Ethington, who helped put this whole panel together. Even though he couldn't be on the panel, he's traveling. Thanks to David Giffels, who had to travel as well. And stay up for a minute. We're going to get some all large group photos on the stage. Thanks to Ryan Humbert as well, who helped put this together on behalf of and Akron 200, and some closing remarks. Oh, I did want to mention, every single person on this stage has been on the Summit FM's From Akron and Beyond show. They're all archived. They're all available as podcasts for a deeper dive into all their stories. you got to hear the Jimmy Image episode where he talks about Klaus Nomi. I mean, the Klaus Nomi affiliation with Akron, and just learning about him and his story and his music.
Dave Zagar wrote a song about Klaus Nomi.
Oh, yeah. Well, how about that? So one more hand for our panel. Thank you, thank you. And here's Mark Greer with a couple closing remarks.
One more round of applause, everyone. One more round of applause for our great panel. And Brad Savage, our moderator from the Summit FM. We hope that you enjoyed this Forgotten History Forum and that you learned something new and exciting about Akron and the people who shaped it. If you're interested in watching more from this series or attending a future forum event, please visit akron200.org or pbswesternreserve.org. Thanks for watching and celebrating Akron's bicentennial.